It's very important to me on this episode to talk about something that I think is really missing from the nervous system conversation, especially online, which is probably where you're absorbing most of this information. And it's something I truly am not hearing talked about, not just not enough, not at all. And it is the difference between dysregulation and sensitization. Something I didn't understand for a really long time, and something I don't hear talked about often is capacity. I believe that capacity is the piece that determines whether sensations have the ability to move through you or whether they immediately trigger terrifying fear. So without capacity, you're going to find that even really good nervous system regulation tools can feel very overwhelming and also not be helpful at all or for a very limited amount of time. So this is something I went years without knowing. And I do feel like had I had this information sooner, I would have healed a lot quicker. So that's what I want to talk about in today's episode. Let's talk first about why do sensations feel so scary? Sensations and symptoms are normally the place where people feel really, really stuck. There are so many sensations. There are so many symptoms. I couldn't even begin to name them all. The sensation itself isn't what is new for a lot of people, but there tends to be a moment or an experience where suddenly there's a very new alarm around that sensation. Sometimes that shows up immediately with a new sensation. Sometimes what's new is the fear that we're experiencing and how that fear begins to escalate more and more. The problem isn't usually the sensation that we're experiencing, but it is the nervous system's ability and capacity to hold that sensation. So what you'll notice is for one person, they will experience this same sensation, and in one body and one person, it passes through. It has the capacity to pass through. Maybe not quickly, maybe not immediately, but it does. It works its way through. And then for another person, likely you and I, it feels very dangerous. It does not pass through. It gets stuck. It gets amplified. It spreads. The difference here is capacity. So let's talk about what specifically capacity is. Capacity is how much activation your system can experience without moving into that alarm state. And not just an alarm, like a very loud, sensitive alarm. So capacity does not mean that you are calm, and it doesn't mean that you're relaxed. I think there's a lot of confusion out there around that nervous system regulation is just like, I'm resting and asleep and calm and nothing gets to me. That's not what it is. Another way I really like looking at capacity is resilience, because I think resilience resonates with people even more than the word capacity. It's like, what is your system's ability to experience stress, sensation, difficult emotions without completely falling apart, without needing to shut everything down, without needing to pull back from your life? And you'll realize that healing these sensations and these symptoms isn't about eliminating those things. It's about expanding the space that your body has to experience them. And I think that's a very important distinction because we're so focused on making the symptoms and the sensations go away. But what would it look like if your capacity was bigger? The way you can compare it is a tidal wave on a system that has a very low capacity versus a tiny drop of water on a system that has a much larger capacity. It's going to have less of an impact. One of them is going to move through and pass, and one of them is going to get stuck. It's very important to me on this episode to talk about something that I think is really missing from the nervous system conversation, especially online, which is probably where you're absorbing most of this information. And it's something I truly am not hearing talked about, not just not enough, not at all. And it is the difference between dysregulation and sensitization. Most content you're going to see out there is going to be focused on nervous system regulation and regulating your nervous system and how your nervous system is dysregulated. There's a focus on calming and grounding and soothing your nervous system. However, many people at this point are not just dysregulated. We moved past dysregulation a long, long time ago. We have moved fully into sensitization. There's a very good chance if you're listening to this content, you are not dysregulated anymore. You are sensitized. So let's talk about the difference between those two things, because the solution is going to be different because the capacity is different between a nervous system that is dysregulated versus one that is sensitized. A sensitized nervous system has a very, very low capacity. It reacts quickly and intensely to any type of stimulus, especially safe ones. It goes far beyond just dysregulation. It experiences sensations as threatening. So we have the basic stuff. Sometimes a sensitized nervous system can interpret temperature, light, sound, but especially symptoms and sensations. And discomfort in the body is read by a sensitized nervous system as a huge problem because that dial is turned up so much and that capacity is so reduced. It experiences lots of safe things or things that the brain wouldn't even register as not only unsafe, but extremely dangerous and threatening. And when you don't know that you're sensitized, you can end up going down the path of regulation on a system that does not yet have capacity for it. This is where I want to look you dead in the eyes and be like, this is what was missing for me. Understanding that my capacity had moved so far beyond dysregulation that I was running in circles trying to figure out what was uniquely wrong with my nervous system, that I can't regulate it. I'm doing everything you guys tell me to do. I'm tapping, I'm resetting my vagus nerve, I'm rubbing my earlobes, I'm sticking my feet up the wall, I'm doing the breathing exercises, I'm doing the therapies, I'm doing the inner child work, I'm doing the IFS, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, getting more and more hopeless because I didn't understand that my system, my nervous system, didn't have the capacity to use those tools. That's not where I am anymore. I am at a place where using tools for nervous system regulation actually are wonderfully helpful to me now. That's because I have more capacity though. Not having this information was detrimental to my healing. It was detrimental to the level of darkness that I had to go through and fight my way out of. And what was so shocking to me was how long I went fervently trying to figure this out and not landing on information and content and teachers and coaches and books about sensitization until 2 years ago. That was so many years spent being confused unnecessarily. And my goal of my content is to help you get unconfused if you've been spinning and trying everything. Okay. A little bit of a tangent there, but I want to stress the importance of knowing where you and your system are at. That is why I created a quiz. Okay, I created this quiz so that it's not to label you and it's not to put you in a box and it's not to drive you down another rabbit hole. It's to help you understand where is your specific nervous system capacity right now. Because if it's sensitized and you're going down the path of what you do for a dysregulated nervous system, that can actually further overwhelm a sensitized one. We don't want to do that. We don't have any room to do that. You don't have any capacity for any more overwhelm in your sensitized nervous system. So depending on where you're watching or listening to this, the quiz is either going to be in the show notes or in the description. It's a really quick quiz and it's just going to kind of show you, that's going to give you a lot more clarity on which path do I need to be following right now. Because like I said, if you're just dysregulated and you're getting stuck kind of in hypoarousal or hyperarousal sometimes, and you have a hard time coming back to baseline, you're going to be someone who finds that nervous system regulation tools work great for that system. And for those of you who are sensitized, you'll find that it's just a not now. There are things that you can be doing with your time and effort. A lot of the things that I talk about on this channel that's going to get you where you need to be so that you're no longer so sensitized and so that we're dealing more so with dysregulation. And then it's kind of like the rules change at that point. I don't know how else to describe it. So definitely take that quiz if you're curious. I have been working really hard on a program called Soft Regulation for sensitized nervous systems. This is the information that I wish I had when I was 15 years old. It is information that would have changed possibly the trajectory of my entire life had I had access to it. The prescription is different. The tools are different, and the path is different if your system is sensitized. If you are experiencing chronic symptoms, if nobody has an answer for you, if you have been medically checked out and no one can make sense of your system going absolutely haywire, what you're missing is the solution for sensitization. And when I was working on this course, I just thought, what would I tell the person I love the most in the world? If we were meeting up for lunch, or if I was getting on a coaching call with them, if they were saying, what do I do? I am out of hope. I've tried everything. Nothing is working. This course is exactly what I would teach them. It's exactly what I would tell them. It's exactly what I would show them as far as how this looks. It's everything I learned and studied and applied and used to desensitize my own system, to get to this place where I am thriving, I am happy, I am engaged, I'm in a better place than I've ever been. And what I did is exactly what I teach you in this program. So if you know that your nervous system is sensitized and you want to be notified when the program is available, click the link in either the show notes or the description and we will email you as soon as it is. Should be available in a week or two. So let's talk about how my capacity actually grew. I'll always start by telling you it wasn't because I found the right protocol. It wasn't because I found the right technique. It's not because I found the right kind of tool. My capacity mainly grew as someone with an extremely sensitized system by changing how I responded to my symptoms. That's probably the biggest thing. If I had to narrow it down to like, what's one thing I want you to focus on, that would be it. Responding with less fear, responding with less urgency, and less meaning making around what I was experiencing. Because it's chaos, right? You're experiencing shit that makes no sense. And then you're trying to make sense of it. I don't recommend it, especially because the way our brain goes when it's so sensitized and it has such low capacity and such low access to that prefrontal cortex, it goes worst case scenario because you are living purely from a survival state. You are living from that survival part of your brain. We have to essentially kind of retrain the way we're interacting with what we're experiencing so that we can begin to grow that capacity. So I changed how I responded to my emotions. I let them move through me. There was a lot of allowing what was to be there, a lot of non-involvement, a lot of non-reaction too. It wasn't just like what I did differently. A lot of it was what I stopped doing. That was the biggest way I built capacity. And I also slowed down the way that I moved through life. I talk about this in the new course that I'm building, but there was a moment where I was making meatballs in my kitchen and I realized I was like borderline running. That may be a little bit of a exaggeration, but like I was moving so quickly through my kitchen. Not only that, but I was like clenched up and I was tense and I was, and I had this moment where I remember it was raining outside and I saw my reflection in the sliding glass door and I was like, oh, I'm contributing to this by how I'm moving. And so I made a deal with myself in that moment that we were going to finish this. It's kind of like because I have to make the sauce and I have to make the meatballs. So it's kind of like a longer process. And I was like, it's nice outside. It's nice and rainy. It was really moody. And I was like, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to drop my shoulders and I'm going to move slower. And it was like this. It was one of those moments where you have one of those intuitive hits where you get clarity, which I think I could do a whole nother podcast on this, but when you work through acceptance, especially, there's a clarity that comes where all of a sudden you will get this information about what you need to do next. And that was big for me. I needed to slow down the way that I was moving through the world because it helped me realize that was also something that was signaling threat and keeping me sensitized, because people who are not sensitized do not move through the world in that way. And I needed to start living as someone who wasn't sensitized. That was a huge shift for me. So I didn't stop life. I changed my internal pacing and my external pacing. And that helped to grow my capacity. I also got back into my life. I was engaging with what was happening around me, engaging with my children, engaging with my work, creating, caring about things again, caring about anything other than healing my chronic symptoms. It took my attention off of it. It built capacity. It built my resilience to be with my life and to be with what was. So my capacity grew when my body and my nervous system finally believed me. It finally believed that every emotion and sensation I felt was not a threat. It was not a problem that needed to be solved. So yeah, this took time. It happened over time, but it really was changing the way that I engaged with my life. People often think that what builds capacity is preventing symptoms and trying to stay calm at all costs and doing nervous system work, specifically nervous system work, but with the very special touch of perfectly, the right way, the right thing, the right number of times. And what actually grows capacity is safety, not reassurance, but like a lived experience of safety. And that's what I talk about a lot, because it's just a quicker path to desensitizing that system. Things like acceptance, accepting where you're at, allowing what's there, not fighting with the symptoms and the sensations and the thoughts and the emotions that you're experiencing. Developing a bit more distress tolerance, the ability to be with what you're experiencing better, be with it in a better way, be with it in a way that signals something different to your nervous system. And then, as always, consistency, doing this stuff on a consistent basis. Because if you think about trust, which we are really rebuilding both with ourselves and with our nervous system, because our nervous system is completely haywire at the point where it is sensitized, completely haywire. Anything is setting it off. It's just so sensitized. When you think about building trust with a person or a scenario or a situation or rebuilding that trust, it's about consistency. It's like, what can I expect from you to do most of the time, a lot of the time? And when we start reacting in a different way, responding in a way that signals something different, our nervous system begins to understand that this is what we can expect. Because right now, it expects you to freak out. Your capacity is so low that the expectation that the nervous system has is everything is an alarm, everything is an emergency, everything is a problem. And you build that capacity by new actions, new behaviors, new responses consistently. And then in time, you begin to trust yourself. Your nervous system begins to trust you. And all these alarms and this sensitivity gets turned down and desensitized. And then you're in a different spot. You're moving most likely to a place where you're now going to start experiencing something that's more like dysregulation, which I will be talking more about, because this isn't just a one and done thing. I do believe it moves in stages. And I believe that if you're trying to use tools in stage 2, when you're actually in stage 1, that's going to be a problem. So I'm trying to do my best to keep it as simple as possible. Capacity grows through repetition. It grows through responding in a different way and sending a different signal. I want to talk a little bit as I wrap this up about like what actually helps, whether you're sensitized or dysregulated. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this because I don't hear anyone talking about it, and it's detrimental to helping people get better. It's detrimental to people actually healing. And it's kind of like, what do they talk about? Having the right tool for the job. This is not a good metaphor that I chose because I'm not handy in any way, but it's like using a hammer when I need a saw. It's like, if I need to cut a piece of wood, I shouldn't be using a hammer. That would make no sense. That would be the least efficient technique to use. Okay, I think that metaphor actually translated okay. So let's clarify something here, because I think this is where a lot of the nervous system advice is going wrong. When we talk about being sensitized versus being dysregulated, we're not talking about one being weaker or more broken or worse off. We are just talking about where is capacity right now and how do we build safety based on the stage that we're in. When you are sensitized, you're experiencing lots of chronic symptoms, right? Things are just popping off. Everything is going crazy. You can't make sense of it. No doctor can make sense of it. Feels insane, but it's not. It's just based on the state that the system is in. And your system, when you are sensitized, is living in constant effort mode. That is the issue. It's not because you're lacking tools. It's because your system is working on overdrive. It's exerting energy it doesn't even really have. It is over responding, it's over monitoring, and it's over managing. You can imagine what a stress on the system that would be for days, weeks, months, and years. The body is working overtime in an attempt to stay safe. So more tools, more control, more monitoring is not the answer here. The answer here is removing the force and removing the urgency. Less internal urgency, less trying to get it right and perfect, less treating your body and your nervous system like they are problems and projects that you need to solve. Because a sensitized nervous system doesn't necessarily need life to get a lot smaller, which is probably what's happened with you over time, because that's just what we do, because we're trying to remove any of the triggers that are making it unsafe. But in time, you find everything's a trigger and you can't hide from everything. A sensitized nervous system needs less fight with the life that it has. And most of the time, getting back into life, walking back into the life that we shrank. A dysregulated nervous system has some capacity. It does. There's more room there because in a dysregulated nervous system, sensations don't instantly mean that there's danger. That's an important distinction because that's not what it's like when you're sensitized. Regulation tools for dysregulated nervous systems can actually help at this stage. Things like meditation, things like journaling, things like breath work, all those things that are prescribed for everyone, including a shit ton of people that are severely sensitized, will work well for a dysregulated nervous system. For a sensitized nervous system, though, those same tools are going to feel like too much. They're actually going to feel like more stress and the wrong kind of stress on that sensitized nervous system because that nervous system is still living from defense mode all the time, 24/7, whereas a dysregulated system gets stuck and it struggles to come back to that window of tolerance. It'll get stuck outside of it, but it finds its way back. It just takes a longer than we want. That for dysregulation, we're looking at, burnout, chronic stress. Maybe you have a couple symptoms, but they're not chronic. You get a migraine every once in a while, upset stomach, those kind of things, some anxiety creeping in, some insomnia creeping in, but these things aren't super chronic at this point. When the things become chronic, welcome to sensitization because that's where you are. The goal, obviously, is to move from sensitized to dysregulated to, I don't know, let me figure out what I want to name phase 3, but a place where you're resilient, you have capacity, everyone's going to get thrown off sometimes. We're all going to have life stressors, but you just know how to deal with it. And when you work your way through this process, I think it's so beautiful because you're going to have such capacity as a human to live such a good life. It's worth it working your way through these phases, but you don't get through them by trying to over control and over monitor and over manage. You get there by slowly building trust. And there's a certain way you build trust in the sensitized phase, and there's a certain way you build trust in the dysregulated phase. Those ways are different. I'm not going to say they don't have crossover. They totally do. So someone who's dysregulated learning about sensitization and the core concepts that I teach about sensitization, you're going to benefit 100%. But if you're sensitized, we've got to desensitize before moving into what would really help you in the dysregulated phase. The goal is to be able, regardless, to let life happen without feeling like you need to interfere, without feeling like you need to fix. It really is getting into this flow state where you're allowing things to flow through and you're letting those sensations move. That's how we don't get stuck. Because we're getting stuck either way. Getting stuck in sensitization is a special kind of hell, but you also get stuck when you're dysregulated. Capacity is going to grow for you when the nervous system experiences over and over and over again that nothing needs to be fixed. That's the message we're trying to solve here. It's like, let your nervous system do its thing. Let it work this out. Get out of the way. Accept what's happening here. Allow this to move through. It's our involvement, unfortunately, and then our involvement with a lot of fear that gets these things just stuck in the locked on mode. So that's what we're trying to do, is get that switch turned to off so that it's not locked on all the time. And then we shift into a place where we're not chronically stuck. We're not experiencing chronic symptoms. We have more resilience. We have more capacity. And then, like I said, the rules change a little bit. And what used to be a no for my sensitized people is now a yes for my dysregulated people. So that's what's missing. Capacity. Not only capacity, but knowing what is your capacity now. Again, if you don't have that information, I have a quiz that is linked either in the description or the show notes. It is something that is going to grow when your body learns that it can experience even very high levels of discomfort, even sensations and symptoms that you absolutely freaking hate, and still be okay, even if you don't love it. And so if sensations for you still feel scary, that's okay. That's part of this. It just means that your system has not learned enough safety yet. So I hope this was helpful for you. Please leave a comment for me with what resonated, where you're at. Did you take the quiz? Are you sensitized? Are you dysregulated? And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.